Russia is one of those countries where the map doesn't just show you where things are, the map explains why the country feels like a different universe. And I don't mean that as a metaphor. Here's a real example. In the middle of the Bering Sea, there are two rocky islands, Big Diomede, Russia, and Little Diomede, USA. They're only about 3.8 kilometers apart. On a clear day, you can literally see one from the other, but the international date line runs between them, so the two islands can be almost a full day apart in time. In one direction, you're looking at tomorrow. In the other direction, you're looking at today. That's your first warning sign. Russia doesn't play by normal geography rules. Now, let's pull back, way back. Russia is the largest country on Earth, with a total area of about 17,098,242 square kilometers. It's roughly 1.8 times the size of the United States. And when you hear largest country, you might picture more of the same, just more land, more cold, more empty space. But Russia's size doesn't just give it more, it gives it extremes, stacked on top of extremes, until the country stops feeling like one place and starts feeling like a collection of multiple worlds stitched together. If you want to experience this with your own eyes, start at Russia's weirdest beginning, Kaliningrad. It's a piece of Russia on the Baltic Sea, separated from the main country. Then trace east across the map, past Moscow, across the Ural Mountains, across Siberia, and keep going until you hit the far northeast edge near the Bering Strait. That west to east stretch is often described as about 9,000 kilometers. And right away, that creates the most famous Russia fact that sounds like a joke until you realize it's completely real. Russia has 11 time zones. 11. So if you say it's 9 a.m. in Russia, that sentence is basically meaningless. Where in Russia? Because in Russia, morning is not a moment, it's a moving wave. Somewhere in the east, the day is already finishing, while somewhere in the west, people are still waking up. And here's a small detail that makes this even funnier. For a long time, Russian rail timetables used Moscow time as a kind of national default, even when the train was crossing multiple local times. That's how you know you're dealing with a geography problem so huge that even time needs a workaround. Now, if Russia is so wide that time breaks, what about its shape? Look at the coasts. Russia's coastline is about 37,653 kilometers long. It faces the Arctic in the north and the Pacific in the east, and it touches a dizzying number of marginal seas. Russia's position is basically, yes, we border the frozen ocean, the stormy ocean, and everything in between. But the most important divider in Russia isn't a sea. It's a line of mountains. The Ural Mountains stretch about 2,500 kilometers from north to south and traditionally mark the boundary between Europe and Asia. And the Urals are a perfect example of Russia's geography messing with your expectations. They're not the tallest mountains in the world, but they are some of the most important mountains on a map because they split a single country across two continents. Now here's the next twist. Most of Russia's people are not spread evenly across this giant landmass. Russia's population is heavily concentrated in the westernmost fifth of the country, with other pockets mostly in the south. So you get this strange reality, one country, two continents, but the human center of gravity sits way over on the European side. And once you go east past the Urals, the land opens up into something that feels endless: Siberia. Siberia is not a single landscape. It's a massive set of landscapes, plains, plateaus, forests, mountains, operating under one of the most intense climate systems on Earth. Russia's climate ranges from steppes in the south through humid continental areas in much of European Russia to subarctic conditions in Siberia and tundra along the polar north. Winters can go from cool near the Black Sea to frigid in Siberia. Summers can go from warm in the steppes to cool along the Arctic coast. So yes, Russia is famous for cold, but cold is only the headline. The real story is extremes. And the single most important word for understanding those extremes is this: permafrost. Approximately 65% of Russia's land surface is underlain by permafrost, ground that stays frozen for years at a time. This is one of those facts that doesn't sound dramatic until you think about what it means. It means huge areas are built on frozen ground that can behave very differently depending on temperature. Roads, buildings, pipelines, basic infrastructure becomes a long-term negotiation with physics. And if you want a perfect symbol of extreme continental climate, look at Lena Pillar's Nature Park in Yakutia. UNESCO describes an annual temperature range of almost 100 degrees Celsius, from about minus 60 degrees Celsius in winter to plus 40 degrees Celsius in summer. That's not a weather forecast. That's a personality test for your entire civilization. Now let's talk about water, because Russia's water geography is quietly one of the most powerful on Earth. Russia has enormous river systems. The CIA World Factbook lists major rivers by length, including the Yenisei Angara at 5,539 kilometers, the Ob Irtish at 5,410 kilometers, the Lena at 4,400 kilometers, and the Volga at 3,645 kilometers. And those rivers don't just look impressive on paper, they define the country's drainage map in a way that's almost unfair. A huge amount of Russia drains northward into the Arctic Ocean. That means you have giant rivers that flow through regions where winter can lock them in ice, and spring thaws can transform entire landscapes. Rivers become transport routes, then frozen roads, then flood engines, then back to rivers again, depending on the season. But if Russia has a water boss level, it's not a river, it's Lake Baikal. Baikal is the oldest and deepest lake in the world. UNESCO describes it as about 25 million years old and roughly 1,700 meters deep. And Baikal contains about 20% of the world's total unfrozen freshwater reserve. That's not a lot of water. That's planetary significance water. If Earth had a freshwater vault, Baikal would be the vault. And it's not just big, it's biologically strange. UNESCO even calls it the Galapagos of Russia, because its age and isolation produced unusual freshwater life. Now, zoom out again, because Russia's other hidden superpower isn't water, it's trees. Russia's land use includes about 49.4% forest, 2018 estimate. And globally, Russia has the largest forest area and is home to about 1/5 of the world's forest area. That forest belt, often taiga, the boreal forest, stretches across enormous distances. It's not just pretty scenery, it shapes climate, ecosystems, and the entire feel of the country from space. It's one of the largest continuous forest regions on Earth, and it helps explain why Russia can look empty on a population map, but absolutely packed on a biomap. And Russia's geography isn't just beautiful, it's dangerous. The CIA World Factbook lists major natural hazards, including permafrost over much of Siberia, plus spring floods and forest fires across wide regions, and volcanic and seismic activity in the Far East. Yes, volcanic activity, because if you still think Russia is just snow and flatness, here comes the part that breaks that stereotype in half: the mountains. Russia's highest point is Mount Elbrus at 5,642 meters. And the CIA even notes it as the highest point in Europe. That's wild on its own. Europe's highest peak often gets associated with the Alps by people who don't look closely at where Europe's boundary is defined. But if the Caucasus is included in Europe's geography, Elbrus is right there as a giant exclamation mark. And Russia's lowest point is also dramatic in the opposite direction. The Caspian Sea sits at about minus 28 meters. So within one country, you go from below sea level to one of the highest peaks in the entire region. Again, extremes stacked on extremes. Now for the final geographical plot twist, the place where Russia stops feeling like Eurasia and starts feeling like the edge of the world. Kamchatka. Kamchatka Peninsula lies along the Pacific Ring of Fire. NASA's Earth Observatory notes there are more than 300 volcanoes on the peninsula, including 29 active ones. UNESCO lists the volcanoes of Kamchatka as a World Heritage Site and describes it as one of the most outstanding volcanic regions on Earth. Think about that. In one country, you can go from Europe's giant plains to the world's largest boreal forests, to permafrost cities, to the deepest freshwater lake, to a peninsula packed with active volcanoes. That is not a normal amount of geography for one flag. So if you're building a Geography Now style mental tour of Russia, here's the most satisfying way to end it. A rapid-fire list of places that prove Russia is not one landscape. It's many. There's Lake Baikal, Earth's freshwater vault. There's Lena Pillars in Yakutia, where extreme cold and heat sculpted giant rock formations and the yearly temperature swing is almost 100 degrees Celsius. There's the Golden Mountains of Altai, an UNESCO-listed region in southern Siberia, where mountain ecosystems and river sources stack together in one of the country's most dramatic natural zones. There's Mount Elbrus, Russia's highest point, and depending on definitions, Europe's highest peak. And there's Kamchatka, one of the most volcanic landscapes on the planet. And if you want a human-made geography line that ties the whole concept together, it's the Trans-Siberian Railroad. Britannica describes it as the longest single rail system in the world, stretching about 9,288 kilometers from Moscow to Vladivostok. That rail line is basically a ruler across a continent, and it exists because Russia's geography is so large that without long-distance connections, the country would feel like multiple countries. So what's the real reason Russia feels so different? It's not because it's cold. It's not even because it's big. It's because Russia forces every part of the map to matter at once. Time zones, coastlines, climate belts, frozen ground, giant drainage basins, forests at planetary scale, mountains that redefine continents, and a volcanic edge that points straight at the Pacific. In Russia, geography isn't background information. Geography is the main character.